At 37,000 feet, both engines of Flight 47 exploded simultaneously. 312 passengers. No power, no hydraulics, no chance of survival according to every aviation expert who later analyzed the data. But Captain Sarah Mitchell didn't panic. She didn't even seem surprised. For the next 18 minutes, she performed flying maneuvers that should have been impossible, guiding a powerless aircraft through a perfect dead-stick landing that saved every life on board. When investigators tried to understand how she had accomplished the impossible, they discovered Sarah's secret. She wasn't just a commercial pilot. She was the military's most classified experimental test pilot, and Flight 47 wasn't an accident. Flight 47 had begun as a routine transatlantic journey from New York to London, scheduled to depart at 8:15 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in March. The Boeing 777-300ER was one of the most reliable aircraft in commercial aviation, with redundant safety systems and an exemplary record for mechanical reliability. Captain Sarah Mitchell had flown this exact route over 200 times during her 12-year career with Atlantic Airways. The passenger manifest included 312 souls aboard, families returning from vacation, business travelers heading to European meetings, and students beginning study abroad programs. The weather forecast indicated favorable conditions throughout the flight path, with clear skies and minimal turbulence expected over the Atlantic crossing. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Captain Sarah Mitchell had completed her pre-flight preparations with the methodical precision that had characterized her entire aviation career. At 38 years old, she was considered one of Atlantic Airways' most skilled and reliable pilots, with over 15,000 flight hours and an unblemished safety record that made her a favorite among both crew members and frequent passengers. Sarah's co-pilot for Flight 47 was First Officer Michael Rodriguez, a competent aviator with 8 years of commercial flying experience, who had worked with Sarah on dozens of previous flights. The crew also included 3 flight attendants and a relief pilot who would assist during the long transatlantic journey. The takeoff from JFK International Airport proceeded normally, with Flight 407 reaching its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet approximately 45 minutes after departure. The aircraft's twin Rolls-Royce Trent 800 engines were performing within normal parameters, and all flight systems were operating as expected during the initial phases of the oceanic crossing. Sarah's flight management during the early portions of the journey was routine and professional, following standard operating procedures for transatlantic commercial flights. Her communications with air traffic control were clear and efficient, and her coordination with the cabin crew ensured that passenger service proceeded smoothly throughout the dinner service. The first indication of trouble came at 10:47 p.m., when Flight 47 was approximately 800 miles east of Newfoundland and well into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The aircraft's engine monitoring systems detected unusual vibrations in the left engine, followed immediately by temperature fluctuations that suggested potential mechanical problems. Sarah's initial response to the engine anomalies was textbook commercial aviation procedure. She immediately alerted her co-pilot, initiated diagnostic procedures to determine the nature of the problem, and prepared to implement standard protocols for single-engine operation if the situation deteriorated further. But the situation deteriorated far beyond anything covered in standard operating procedures. At 10:49 p.m., the left engine exploded catastrophically, sending shrapnel through the wing structure and severing critical hydraulic lines that controlled the aircraft's primary flight systems. 2 seconds later, debris from the left engine damaged the right engine so severely that it also failed completely. Flight 47 suddenly found itself at 37,000 feet with no engine power, no hydraulic pressure, and rapidly degrading electrical systems. The aircraft began an immediate descent as gravity overcame the lift generated by its wings, and multiple system failures cascaded throughout the flight controls. First Officer Rodriguez began executing emergency procedures according to his training, but the combination of simultaneous engine failures and hydraulic system damage created a situation that exceeded the scenarios covered in commercial aviation emergency protocols. The aircraft was essentially a 300-ton glider with limited controllability and no power source to maintain critical systems. Sarah's response to the emergency was immediate and decisive. but it was also unlike anything Rodriguez had seen during his commercial flying career. Instead of following the checklist procedures that called for attempts to restart the engines, Sarah immediately began implementing flight control techniques that seemed to come from a completely different type of aviation training. The maneuvers Sarah executed during the first minutes after the engine failures were extraordinary by commercial aviation standards. She used differential braking, asymmetric flap deployment, and control surface manipulation techniques that managed to maintain aircraft stability despite the loss of powered flight controls. Her actions were precise, confident, and apparently based on extensive experience with powerless aircraft control. Sarah's communication with air traffic control was calm and professional, but it included technical terminology and procedural references that were not typically part of commercial aviation emergency protocols. She requested clearance for maneuvers that controllers had never heard of, and she provided technical assessments of the aircraft's condition that demonstrated knowledge beyond standard commercial pilot training. The passengers remained largely unaware of the severity of their situation during the first few minutes after the engine failures. Sarah's announcement over the public address system was reassuring and confident, explaining that the aircraft was experiencing mechanical difficulties, but that the crew was trained to handle such situations safely. But the flight attendants and relief pilot recognized that Sarah's handling of the emergency was unlike anything they had seen during their commercial aviation careers. The techniques she was using to control the powerless aircraft seemed to require knowledge and skills that exceeded standard pilot training, and her apparent familiarity with the situation suggested experience that was difficult to explain. The most remarkable aspect of Sarah's emergency response was her ability to maintain controlled flight despite the complete loss of engine power and hydraulic systems. Commercial aircraft are not designed to be controllable under such conditions, and standard training teaches pilots that dual engine failure with hydraulic loss is essentially unsurvivable in most circumstances. Sarah's approach to the emergency was systematic and methodical, as if she was following procedures that she had practiced extensively but that were not part of standard commercial aviation training. She seemed to anticipate system failures before they occurred and to have backup plans for situations that were not covered in normal emergency checklists. The aircraft's flight path during the emergency period demonstrated navigation and control techniques that were remarkable for the circumstances. Sarah managed to maintain a controlled descent rate while steering toward areas where emergency landing might be possible, using dead-reckoning navigation methods that suggested extensive experience with powerless aircraft operation. Sarah's coordination with her crew during the emergency was professional and effective, but it also revealed knowledge of aircraft systems and emergency procedures that seemed to exceed what would be expected from commercial pilot training. She provided technical instructions and system assessments that indicated familiarity with aircraft operations under conditions that commercial pilots would rarely encounter. The most challenging phase of the emergency came as Flight 4047 descended through 15,000 feet, and Sarah began searching for a suitable location for an emergency landing. The aircraft was still over the Atlantic Ocean, hundreds of miles from the nearest airport, and conventional wisdom suggested that a water landing was the only viable option. But Sarah's navigation during this phase was extraordinary. She seemed to know the exact locations of emergency airfields and military installations that were not marked on standard commercial aviation charts. Her course corrections were precise and purposeful, indicating knowledge of landing facilities that should not have been available to commercial pilots. The breakthrough came when Sarah announced her intention to attempt a landing at Gander International Airport in Newfoundland, despite the fact that the aircraft's current position and glide ratio made such a landing appear mathematically impossible. Air traffic controllers attempted to redirect Flight 47 toward closer emergency landing sites, but Sarah insisted that Gander was achievable using techniques that she did not explain over the radio. Sarah's approach to Gander International Airport was unlike anything in commercial aviation training manuals. She executed high-altitude energy management techniques, using advanced understanding of aerodynamics and aircraft performance to extend the powerless aircraft's gliding range far beyond what should have been possible with a commercial airliner. The landing approach itself was a masterpiece of precision flying that violated several fundamental principles of commercial aviation safety. Sarah brought Flight 47 in at an angle and speed that should have resulted in catastrophic impact, but she used ground effect phenomena and advanced flare techniques to achieve a controlled touchdown that saved every life aboard. The investigation that followed the emergency landing began immediately, with aviation authorities from multiple countries participating in efforts to understand how Sarah had accomplished what every expert considered impossible. The National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, and Transport Canada all sent investigators to analyze the incident. The initial findings were puzzling to investigators, who expected to document a catastrophic accident with few survivors. Instead, they found evidence of piloting skills and techniques that exceeded anything in commercial aviation training programs. Sarah's flight management during the emergency demonstrated knowledge and capabilities that seemed to come from a completely different type of aviation background. The first anomaly investigators discovered was Sarah's personnel file, which contained gaps and inconsistencies that were unusual for a commercial pilot with her experience level. Her training records included certifications and qualifications that were not typically available to civilian aviators, and her background check revealed security clearances that seemed inappropriate for commercial aviation employment. Further investigation revealed that Sarah's aviation career had not followed the typical progression from flight training to commercial airline employment. Her early flying experience included assignments and training programs that were not documented in standard aviation databases, and her technical knowledge seemed to exceed what could be acquired through civilian flight training alone. The breakthrough in understanding Sarah's background came when military security officers arrived at the investigation site and immediately classified all evidence related to her emergency flying techniques. The investigators were informed that Sarah's flying skills were related to national security matters that could not be disclosed through normal aviation safety investigation procedures. The classified briefing that followed revealed Sarah's true identity and the reason for her extraordinary flying abilities. She was not simply a commercial pilot who had received additional training. She was an active-duty military test pilot who had been assigned to fly commercial routes as part of a highly classified program designed to test advanced aircraft technologies under real-world conditions. Sarah's employment with Atlantic Airways had been arranged through a covert program that placed military test pilots in civilian aviation positions where they could gather intelligence about foreign aviation technologies and test experimental flight systems without attracting attention. Her commercial flying career had been a cover for her continued work on classified military aviation projects. The advanced flying techniques Sarah had used to save Flight 447 were skills she had developed through her work as a test pilot for experimental aircraft that incorporated cutting-edge flight control technologies. Her ability to control a powerless commercial aircraft was based on extensive experience flying prototype vehicles with revolutionary control systems that allowed unprecedented maneuverability under adverse conditions. The program that had placed Sarah in civilian aviation was one of several classified initiatives designed to maintain American technological superiority in military aviation while gathering intelligence about foreign aerospace developments. Test pilots like Sarah were embedded in commercial airlines, cargo operations, and private aviation companies to provide cover for their continued military research activities. Sarah's specific assignment had involved testing flight control technologies that could allow military aircraft to continue operating effectively even after suffering catastrophic damage to engines, hydraulic systems, or other critical components. Her experience with these experimental systems had prepared her to handle exactly the kind of emergency that Flight 47. The dual-engine failure that had caused the Flight 4047 emergency was not the result of mechanical malfunction or maintenance issues. Investigation revealed that the aircraft had been deliberately sabotaged by foreign agents who were attempting to eliminate Sarah and prevent her from completing her classified mission. The explosion had been designed to appear like a catastrophic accident, while ensuring that no survivors could provide information about the attack. The sabotage operation had been planned by foreign intelligence services that had identified Sarah as a key figure in American military aviation research. Their objective was to eliminate her knowledge of experimental flight technologies and to disrupt the classified program that placed test pilots in civilian aviation positions. But the saboteurs had underestimated Sarah's capabilities and the extent of her training with experimental flight control systems. The emergency landing that they had intended to be impossible had instead demonstrated the effectiveness of the advanced technologies that Sarah had been testing while exposing their operation to American counterintelligence agencies. The successful emergency landing had saved 312 lives, but it had also compromised the classified program that had placed Sarah in commercial aviation. Her extraordinary flying skills had attracted attention that made it impossible for her to continue operating undercover as a commercial pilot. Sarah's reassignment to overt military test pilot duties was immediate and permanent. The program that had embedded test pilots in civilian aviation was terminated, and new security protocols were implemented to protect military aviation research from foreign intelligence operations. The investigation into the sabotage of Flight 47 led to the arrest of several foreign agents who had been operating within the commercial aviation industry. The operation had been more extensive than initially realized, with multiple attempts to target American military personnel who were working under civilian cover. The technical analysis of Sarah's emergency flying techniques became the subject of classified research programs designed to incorporate her methods into standard military pilot training. Her ability to control a powerless aircraft was studied extensively to develop new training protocols and aircraft design specifications. The passengers and crew of Flight 4047 were debriefed about their experience, but were not informed about the classified aspects of Sarah's background or the sabotage that had caused their emergency. They were told that Sarah had received additional training that had prepared her for the emergency, but the true extent of her qualifications remained classified. Sarah's heroic actions during the Flight 47 emergency were recognized through classified military commendations and awards that could not be disclosed publicly. Her skills had saved hundreds of lives and had exposed a foreign intelligence operation that posed significant threats to American aviation security. The commercial aviation industry implemented new security protocols based on lessons learned from the Flight 47 incident, though the specific details of the sabotage and Sarah's background remained classified. Enhanced screening procedures and background investigations were designed to prevent similar attacks while protecting legitimate aviation operations. Sarah's transition back to overt military test pilot duties was successful, and she continued her work on experimental aircraft development in facilities where her extraordinary skills could be utilized without compromising operational security. Her experience during the Flight 47 emergency provided valuable insights for military aviation research and pilot training programs. The Flight 447 incident became a classified case study in military aviation circles, demonstrating the importance of advanced pilot training and the potential threats posed by foreign intelligence operations targeting American aerospace personnel. Sarah's successful emergency landing was analyzed extensively to improve aircraft design and pilot training protocols. The passengers who had been saved by Sarah's extraordinary flying skills never learned the full truth about their rescue. They knew only that their pilot had demonstrated remarkable ability during a catastrophic emergency, not that she had used classified military techniques developed through years of experimental test pilot training. Captain Sarah Mitchell had indeed landed a plane with no engines, saving every life aboard through flying skills that should have been impossible for a commercial pilot to possess. But her secret training as a military test pilot had prepared her for exactly this kind of emergency, and her extraordinary rescue had exposed both foreign threats and American capabilities that were supposed to remain hidden forever. The investigation that followed would reveal that Flight 4547 wasn't just an emergency landing. It was a demonstration of advanced military aviation technologies that had been tested under the most extreme conditions possible. Sarah's impossible rescue had been made possible by her secret life as one of America's most classified test pilots, and her heroic actions had saved far more than just the 312 people aboard her aircraft.